Hello, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Yisroi, Shabbos Mevorchem Adar Aleph. Yesterday was Chov Bei Shvat, Yemai Lulu Yortzeit of Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka. So as usual, we're speaking today a thought for the week. What lessons do we learn from Parshas Yisroi? How is it connected to Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka? And I hope we'll cover everything today. Today we're going to speak about huge subjects with essential relevance to every single Yid, as we'll soon see. But as usual, these past months, our hearts and minds are with our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael, the time of war. So we're starting with Tzedakah, Gdei Tzedakah, Shemakareves Esagula. So we're giving tzedakah now. Mashiach now. All the houses should return peacefully and the war should end now. Now we're going to say a prayer which is connected to the events of this week. Har Sinai. V'yodaita hayoim v'asheveisol v'vecho ki adinoi hu elihim b'shamayim mimal v'aloretz mitochas einoid. Know this day and take unto your heart that the Lord is Hashem in the heavens above and upon the earth below. There is nothing else. So it's not only about Hashem being one, but v'yadaita hayoim, you should know it. And not only that, v'asheveisol v'vecha, you should take it to heart. And that Hashem is the only existence. B'shamayim me'al v'aloretz mitachas einoid. Okay, let's go straight into the parsha. This week's parsha is called Parshas Yisroi. And we have the story of Matan Torah, the Sinai experience, where Hashem gives us the Torah, which hands down is the greatest event in the history of mankind, in the history of the world. Now, the questions and the issues are famous. There's a big argument whether the story of Yisroi converting to Judaism happened before Matan Torah or happened after Matan Torah. It's an argument amongst many of the commentators, Rishonim. But the Zohar goes with the opinion that it happened before Matan Torah. And so too Chassidus. And here comes the obvious question. It seems that the conversion of Yisroi to Judaism is a prerequisite to Matan Torah, because everything in Torah is precise. So if that conversion of Yisroi turning to Judaism happened before Matan Torah, that means there's a reason for it. So we have to understand, why is it so important to tell us that there was a Gentile who became a Jew? We spoke about this once before, and we made one emphasis, and today I'm going to stress a different point. Last time, we spoke about the idea that the name Yisroi means addition, and it also means superiority, and its connection, and Rashi brings the name Yisroi meaning an addition, an additional parsha. And we explained the concept of Yisroi ha'or min ha'choshech, because Yisroi represented the epitome of secular study, so to speak, because he was Kohen Midian. And first I want to read one Baal HaTurim here. In the spirit of this week's parsha, we have the commandment of Kavod Avicha v'Semecha, to honor your parents, as one of the 10 commandments that's mentioned in this week's parsha. So there's one interesting Baal HaTurim straight away at the beginning on the words Yisroi, which I want to point out because it's unusual. I'm not a bucky, but he says as follows. Yisroi, on the word Yisroi, the Baal HaTurim says, B'gematria koimer hoyol avodah zara. Yisroi, the gematria of his name is 616. Figure it out, 616, 615 in Makoilel. It equals to koimer hoyol avodah zara. He was a priest to false gods. Also, U'b'gematria HaTorah. It's also equal to the word HaTorah. Both of those things, Koimer Hoyol Avodah Zara, but that becomes transformed into HaTorah. Shahoya Koimer Avodah Zara. First he was a priest of Avodah Zara. Ubal is Gayer Kabbalah HaTorah, and he became a convert to receive the Torah. And he brings down over here, the Baal HaTurim was the son of the Rosh. Loshen Adeni Ovi HaRosh Zal. So I want to read it inside, because if the Baal HaTurim so fit to mention his father in Parshas Yisroi, I imagine Since the Parshas Yisro mentioned Kabbalas Avicha Zemecha, I imagine the Baal HaTurim felt especially this idea to mention his father in his Pirish on this week's Parsha. So that spirit, I decided to mention inside the Baal HaTurim, where he mentions the Rosh, to give respect to his father. The greatest respect to his father is to say, I heard something from my father, and put it into his Pirish, as many other great Gedolei Yisrael have done. Okay, so when we spoke last time about this, which is a phenomenal thing, we spoke about the idea, it's important to know before we get to Torah, that the wisdom of the Torah is superior to all other wisdoms. In other words, when someone gives you a gift, you should appreciate that gift. Somebody could think that there's something outside of Torah, some value, some wisdom that's outside the Torah. Therefore, before we get into Torah, we have the one who is the master of all sciences, of all wisdoms, secular wisdoms. Imagine somebody who studied every single thing you could imagine, Al Shvatzior, Hindu, Buddha, Aztecs, Islam, Christianity, black magic, white magic, green magic, I don't know what. And he studied everything there is to study all over the world. And then he comes to the conclusion, it's all nothing. It's all hot air compared to the Torah. So that's the beauty and the depth and the profundity of Yisro coming along and saying, Ata Yadaiti, how wild is it that Yisro, imagine, I said this last time, imagine if the Pope, Avi Avei got up on cable TV and internet and announced to the world that Christianity was false. I lived a lie. I fell for rubbish. Imagine. And then he proclaims to the world on public television, internet, whatever, there's only one true religion. And there's only one true wisdom. And that's the wisdom of the Torah. So this idea had to come before Matan Torah, as there was the limud of Torah, the knowledge of Torah was before Matan Torah, and Yisro, by him converting, that was symbolic, and that reflected the idea that the epitome, the president of Harvard, and Yale, and Cambridge, and Oxford, all put together, came along, and he was recognized as the smartest person in the world. It's all nothing. That's what we spoke last time. And last time, it's based on Likutei Sichos Chelik and Aleph Yisro. Yisro Miloshin, Yisro Ne'or Min HaChoshech. We have to say how the greater light comes from the darkness, etc. See there. And then I emphasize more the idea of the wisdom of Torah. Today I want to emphasize it a bit more about the idea how Torah impacts the world, and including the idea of impacting Gentiles. Before we get to Yisro, what I want to mention, a passage that comes later, there's a Maimon Azal, and this pushed me to talk about the subject. This Maimon Azal, and especially it comes back to last week, we spoke about Paroi and Amalek, two interesting characters, two anti-Semites. And they're both Gentiles. But wait, there's another Gentile. His name is Yisro. Very important to realize that. We're talking to a Yid, and he's in a world full of Gentiles. How do we relate? Is everyone a Paroi? Is everyone an Amalek? Guess what? According to the Mechilta, this week's Parsha comes to tell us this point. Obviously, the main point is Matan Torah, but we'll soon explain. But let me just first tell you the Lashon, and the Lashon is as follows. V'nismacha Parshas Yisro leParshas Amalek. The Parsha of Yisro follows immediately from the Parsha of Amalek. We ended off last week's Parsha B'Shalach with the story of Amalek. Because Yisro represents the polar opposite of Amalek. Amalek ben Esav. You can have Amalek. He was the grandson of Esav, the son of Eliphaz. HaKorav Lanu. He descended from a Jewish family, but he's not Jewish, but he descended from a Jewish family. You know, with relatives like this, as they say. So, Amalek ben Esav HaKorav Lanu. Amalek, who's a ben Esav, which is a relative. Osimonu Ra, he did with us evil. Sheba mimechek lilachem kenegdeinu b'midbar. He went out of his way to wage war against us. Partially, he became mamish, a total anti-Semite. who wants to pick a fight, who's an aggressor, who starts up. But the Yisroi, in contrast to that Yisroi, Shahoyim Mino Umois, he wasn't a Korev, just straight up a Gentile. Osi Manu Toiva. He acted with us with kindness. Shahoyim Lanu Leinayim B'Derech HaMidbar, whatever, because later on, the Torah says that he was our eyes for us in the Midbar. It means that he offered guidance. He gave Moshe Rabbeinu advice in this week's Parsha. But the point of the Mechilta is that there's a contrast. We have one Gentile, Amalek, a psychopath, like we spoke last week, anti-Semite, and then we have a Gentile like Yisrael, who ultimately brings us benefit, is a good person, and he himself converts to Judaism. Okay. Now let's go further on in the pasuk, a very interesting pasuk. And after it says, in the beginning of the parsha, where it says, "Vayishma Yisrael koyim midban chosim Moshe," and he converts, then it says the way Moshe told Yisrael. How did the whole thing come about? Vayisaper Moshe lechosnei. Moshe told Yisrael everything that happened, and then the pasuk says, "Vayichad Yisrael al kol ha'tova asher osa Hashem liYisrael asher tzilei mi'ad Mitzrayim." Pasuk says Vayichad Yisrael. How is it translated? Vayichad Yisrael. Yisrael rejoiced. That's what Rashi says. One pshat Rashi says is that Yisrael rejoiced, but then Rashi says something on the same word Vayichad, because Vayichad is an interesting word. It's not really it's not really Lashon Kodesh. It's more Aramaic. And Rashi says in the words Vayichad Yisrael, Vayismach Yisrael. Yisrael was happy. Zel pshutei. Umedesh Agoden Nasab Sori Chadudin. When he heard the news, Hamitzrayim, fall of the Egyptian Empire, which he was part of before, he felt his skin, goosebumps. He felt a bit upset about that. So what Rashi says, Umedesh Agoda, seems to be a negative thing, that, even though he was going to convert, at that time he still felt a bit sad that there was the fall of the Egyptian Empire. But then becomes the question, it seems like they're totally opposite. Vayichad Yisrael, Vayismach Yisrael. Yisrael was so happy that he heard the news of how the Eibishter treated the Yidden. And then Rashi himself brings a Medrash Agoda, which seemed to say that he still had some sort of allegiance, some sort of attachment upon him to Mitzrayim. But wonders of wonders, the Oira Chaim HaKodesh, on this pasuk, learns pshat that the Vayichad, Chedud and prickly, goes on the Simcha. Unbelievable pshat. Vayichad Yisrael, so the Targum Unkla says that he means what the Targum Unkla says, V'chadi, and then he says, V'tzorech l'das, why does the pasuk say something Aramis, and why doesn't it just say a Lashon Borush, a Lashon HaKodesh? Anyways, that's what the Eir Chaim asks. And the Eir Chaim then says the following. The pasuk wants to tell us how deep was the joy that Yisrael felt. Because of the great joy, it was a physical sensation. And the Eir Chaim says, when somebody is very joyous, when it goes beyond what you would imagine, beyond your expectations, something like an unparalleled moment of joy, you're going to feel it as a physical sensation in your senses. You can actually faint. And then he says you can get into danger. Anyway, see there the end of the rest of the Eir Chaim. So what I want to say is that according to the Eir Chaim, Vayichad Libo doesn't just mean stam a joy. It's going further with such a joy that permeated the body in the sense of Kol Atzmosei Temarna, but it seems that it was more penetrating, more powerful than even just regular saying Kol Atzmosei Temarna. It was like shaking and felt piercing. So that's what the Eir Chaim says. Now I want to read you, and this is what really got me thinking about what I'm going to speak today, a different emphasis. The Baal HaSulam says, the Balaturim on Vayichad Yisri says, Sheyichad liboy lekeil echod v'nasi Yehudi. The Losh Vayichad comes from the Loshin Yichad liboy. He unified his heart in the service of Hashem and became a Yid. Sheyichad liboy lekeil echod. Just like Yiddishkeit is an idea of Keil Echad, so to his heart became unified to Hashem, which means, to paraphrase it, Achdus Havaya hat durchgenommen in sein Herz, to have a Ratzon Echad la Hashem Echad. Wow! That's what the Baal HaTurim is saying. So now to understand it, what happened by Matan Torah? And this is a whole other dimension, not only that Torah, Chochmas HaTorah, is the greatest Chochmah, but that Chochmas HaTorah, Yisrael and Eisam Kochberichu Kol Echad, the idea of Torah is to reveal how Hashem is the only true reality. As we spoke many times, one of the main innovations of Torah's Chassidus, as it says in many places, I'm not going to go into it again, was that when he says Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, he doesn't only come to the conclusion that there's only one God, and that we don't bow down to idols, which we also learn out from this week's parasha. We learn out from the pasuk Anochi Hashem Elokecha and V'lo yilech elikim acherim. That's one idea. But according to Chassidus B'Dakas, the whole idea is that not only we don't bow down to another God, we don't give preciousness or value to anything but God. There is only one reality, Hashem. Das Pshat Achdus Havaya. And the Alter Rebbe makes it very, very clear in Tanya. Everyone knows the famous chapter 36, Perek Lamed Vav of Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe talks about the whole idea of Yiddishkeit is Lasses Leis Baruch Dira B'Tachtenim. Of course, it's the idea that we are Atav Echatonim Mikol Amim, and that the Eibush has a Ava Atzmis to Bnei Yisrael, and Machshavten Shei Yisrael Kodmel Chol Dover. Yes, but part and parcel of that is our Avodah revealing. What the Eibush wanted was that our Avodah should be to reveal in physical existence. Bashamayim Imal V'Aloros Mitochas Einoid. Through Torah Mitzvahs, a Yid shows how the world is not Olam Miloshn Helen V'Hester, but that the world itself screams Hashem. And that every single iota and every single particle of the world cries out, Einoi Milvadoi. And this is what the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, Perek Lamed Vav, it is very famous, which comes out of the story of Yiddishkeit. I think we spoke about this many times. The story of Yiddishkeit starts with Matan Torah, really. When there's Amshachas Ha'atzmos and we saw Hashem Echad in the world. But then we had to, from the time of Matan Torah till Mashiach, that truth is permeating Olam Hazeh Gashmi more every single day. Today more than yesterday, tomorrow more than today, until we see the full explosion of that truth completely, as we'll soon explain. But first I want to read you the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe, Mamish Moirin de Klosheni Azov. V'gam kvar hoyle lo meinze b'shas Matan Torah. This idea that the world becomes a dira b'tachtenim and there was a full revelation of the essence of Hashem happened by Matan Torah. K'dichsiv at horei salodas ki Hashem hu elikim einoid milvadoi. You should know that Hashem is the only true Eibush, there's nothing else besides Him. Horei samamish b'riyah chushis. You actually saw it. K'dichsiv v'cholam rei mesakelis rei mesanishma. Upishur Azal, this is what I want to bring out. What does it mean that they saw the sounds? Mistaklim lemizrach v'shemenes hadibriyetza nechi chuli. It's brought down that in Mechilta also, Rashi brings it down. They looked eastward and heard the divine speech issuing forth, saying, I am Hashem. V'chein la'ar berucha yisolamaylo lamata. And so too, turning toward the 4 points of the compass and above and below, they heard the words coming from every direction. As explained also in Tikunei Zohar, The les asar deloi milmenei imain chulu. There was no place from which he did not speak to them. That means at that moment of Vayera Davai al Har Sinai, the entire world, the entire creation reached the ultimate moment of truth, and the moment when the entire world was seen as nothing but the Eibishter himself. The idea of Achdus Havaya. The trees, the moons, the plants, everything, Demim, Tzemeir, Chaim, Medaber, everything is only but a revelation of Hashem. That's what happened by Matan Torah, and that's what the idea of Yiddishkeit is all along. So, again, we have an idea that Yiddishkeit is the idea of Achdus Hashem. And the point is that the Yidden are the ones who reveal that, and ultimately Mashiach will come, then when we finish the job of revealing that in the world, then we will be one more intimate with the Eibishter more and more. So the whole idea of Yiddishkeit is the relationship with the Yid and Hashem. But to make our relationship with the Eibishter deeper, we have to actualize the idea of Achdus Havaya, Kefi Pirish Achsidus, to reveal how there's nothing else but the Eibishter. And this is also, now we'll understand what it means. Rashi, on the Pasuk Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. What does Rashi say? Hashem, Shehu Elokeinu Ato. Hashem Elokeinu, the Hashem which is now only our Hashem. V'lo Elokeinu ha'umos, but the world has not recognized him. Hu Osad Liyos Hashem Echad. He's one day going to be Hashem Echad. Because then I shall change the nations to speak a clear language, so that they may all call out in the name of Hashem. He can ask Mamish a klotz kasha. Thousands of years, Yidden went on Mesiras Nefesh Mamish, Al Kiddush Hashem. And that's what they're saying. That Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu. You should know that right now it's only Hashem Elokeinu. When Mashiach comes, it'll be Hashem Echad. Why are we mentioning Gentiles? Actually, they're the ones who are causing me to be shot right now, to be tortured, to be burned at the stake, or whatever it is. So why are we mentioning that? Just say Hashem Echad. And the answer is because Achdus Havaya Bashtet, the true idea of Achdus Hashem, is when it's going to be revealed throughout every iota, every particle of existence, including Goyim. So again, the Kavanah is B'Shvil Yisrael, B'Shvil HaTorah. Ultimately, it's about Yidden, and we were the chosen nation because we have a special relationship. But the Gentile also has his role through keeping Shabbat Mitzvah B'nai Noach. He also has his relationship with Hashem. And until a Yisroi doesn't reach a level of a Yichad, he's Miyachad Levavai, he acknowledges Hashem Echad, it's missing in Achdus Hashem. And that's what it means. It's missing in the revelation, the full revelation. Until the day will come where it's going to be not only Hashem Elokeinu, but it's going to be Hashem Echad, then you know Mashiach didn't come yet. That's the fact. So Yisra Yesh Leimar, this idea, and like the Balaturim says, Vayichad Liboy, he was Miyachad Liboy, connected with the Eirei Chaim says, it was a physical sensation, and he united also his heart to a Keil Echad. That was Mein La'asad, just like the Alter Rebbe says, that the whole Sinai was Karhoi Le'lam Mein Zeh B'Shas Matan Torah. Maybe you could say, like we say in Chassidus, another place about the mitzvah of Milah, that there had to be one mitzvah pre-Matan Torah. That's post. Ma'asav is similar, Bonim similarly, as explained, and I don't want to get into it now. The same thing over here. We had to have one example of the idea of the tachlis of the whole Matan Torah's lasses lois baruch dirib tachtonim, to make this world a dwelling place for Hashem, to the degree that we also get the Gentile and the entire world. A me'ain of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, like Rashi says over here, had to happen before Matan Torah. Who represents that? Who signifies that? Who reflects that? Yisroel's conversion to the level of a yichad, that is miyachad levavai lekeil echad, was a revelation of Achdas Hashem, of Dira B'Tachtonim, that had to be pre-Matan Torah to show us what the ultimate is. That's the whole tachlis. That's what it's all about. To reach that level of Yedai Tayoim Vashavei Sol V'Vecha. And there's a very important ha'ara from the Rebbe in Likutei Sichos, volume 4, page 1171, ha'ara 22, which I'm just going to tell you briefly what he says here, that in addition to the fact that every revelation, if it just stays on a level of faith, that means it didn't totally unite itself with the person. So we're saying if something's on a level just of faith, our relationship to Hashem is only a level of faith. That means it could be superficial, it could be distant. I'm not getting into the whole subject now. But then the Rebbe writes like this, but when it comes to the concept and the emunah of Hashem's oneness, over here we say, if there's one iota, one part of creation in existence that doesn't feel this oneness, that's the total opposite of the idea of Einid Movadei. True unity and Achdus Hashem is only when it permeates every single part of existence, and it comes from existence. Similar to what the Alter Rebbe brings in chapter 36, that they felt it throughout all of creation. That's the same thing over here, on a personal level, on a universal level. I'm just going to say two more things quickly, and then we'll translate it in Avodas Hashem. First of all, connecting it to the Rebbetzin. Every single person who encountered the Rebbetzin and knew the Rebbetzin brings out the same point. She made a tremendous impact on everyone. There were caretakers, there were doctors, there were people that worked in the house. And I'm talking about Gentiles because today we're focusing on our mission as a light unto the nations to bring the beauty of Yiddishkeit. That the Gentiles should see the beauty of Yiddishkeit like Yisrael and impact them to become better people. And that's what the Rebbetzin did in a tremendous way. There's no person that had an encounter with the Rebbetzin that wasn't impacted to become a better person. And just to give the ultimate example, a very powerful example, was there was a famous court case in the saga of the Svarim and Hey Tevis, for those that know, and the Rebbetzin had to make a statement, and she made a statement that she doesn't understand what the whole question is about the books, about the Holy Svarim. If the Rebbe himself doesn't belong to himself, he belongs to the Chassidim, so obviously the books, the Rebbe's Svarim, also belong to the movement. And there was a judge, it was a Gentile judge, it was a federal court, he was a very prominent person, and he said later on that those words that the Rebbetzin said, which was so elevated, so special, they made the deepest impact on this judge, and that was something that swayed and impacted the judge to rule in that direction and with the true understanding of what a Rebbe is. And the same thing, everyone had, there's so many stories, I don't want to get into it, but it inspires us that when you go to the store, you have an Uber driver, whatever it is, we encounter Gentiles. Most of us encounter Gentiles all the time. We have to remember we have a mission, and our mission is to be Mamleches Kohen V'Goy Kodesh. We have royalty, regalty, and we're on a higher standard, but in a good way, that the other person feels cherished, the other person feels values, and the other person gets inspired to become better. Going in the spirit of the Baal HaTurim that mentions his father, the Rosh, I want to mention my mother, to be Mekayim Kabed Esavicha V'Semecha. I never knew my father. I was told he was very much into learning Torah and giving tzedakah, so I'm mentioning him, and that inspires me greatly. But for my mother, Allah Shalom, I used to always hear, Torah is the best Schoire. The famous line that I've mentioned by Fabrengen. So this week is the parasha of Matan Torah. I'm mentioning my mother to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Kabbalah Tzavika V'Simecha, and she told me and my brothers, my sister, in our home, she used to always say, Torah is the best Schoire. Torah is the best merchandise. So this is the lesson we have to take. The lesson we have to take is with the pasuk we started off today. V'yadai ta'hayoyim This idea of the unity of Hashem is something you have to study, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Shaykh V'Emunah at length. And this is the experience of Sinai that we learned about in today's parsha. But V'yadaita Hayom is not enough. Where do we see Vashevoisal Levecha? Vayishma Yisroi, Eze Shmua Uba. He didn't only listen, he had to their head. That's the Chiddush. It hit the spot. Vayichad. It's not only enough that you learn V'yadaita Hayom, but it has to be Vashevoisal Levecha, Vayichad, as the Erechaimlin's pshat. It was a simcha, but such a simcha that he permeated the person, hit the spot. And obviously this has an effect on the person when it's in such a way. And this is one of the issues in life, when we talk about change and growth and spiritual advancement. Many people have the question, they don't see it affecting them. But this is the answer how? Through das. V'yadaita hayom, miloshen das. Yitke machshavte b'choizik, immerse yourself. And then, Vashevoisal Levecha, Simu Levavchem. Then you'll have that it hits the right spot, and you have no idea how great the impact will be in positive ways. The Eibusha from the Schus from the Ballot, yesterday's Ballas, Yortzeit, wie Elu, der Rebbetzin, should be Pel Yeshua, Bekerev Oretz, Adi Al Yidin was Dafen geholfen, and was for Yidin Zolon Zayin. Whoever needs help in any area in the life of Bani Chaim Azeni should be helped. Take of him Yad Mamish and her merit, and we should come to the day where we'll see the Gilui Mamish of Hashem Echad, Begula Amitzvah Shlema, take of him Yad Mamish.